Welcome everyone. My name is Venkatesh Rao, and I'm here with my colleague Rebekah, and we're here to talk about evaluating LLMs. So, quick show of hands: how many of you are trying to evaluate an LLM system right now, or maybe in the near future? Okay, quite a few hands. All right, so let's get to it. We'll start with a brief overview. We'll talk about what makes this problem interesting, and then we'll quickly dive into a workflow, a Snorkel opinionated workflow that lets you evaluate LLM systems. And then we'll back it up with a live demo showing you how it's done in the product today as part of the R3 release that Alex just talked about this morning. So here's the spoiler alert. There is no silver bullet. There is no mathematical formula that you can run to check if your responses are good enough. There isn't a litmus test that you can just run or an industry standard benchmark that you can use to evaluate these systems. However, we do know that in this journey, you're going to need some tools along the way. And those tools need to be put together in a workflow that helps you make progress, monitor progress. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We want to make 3 key messages today. The first one is that evaluations need to be specialized. After all, we need to evaluate your LLM in the context of your use case. These are not generic LLMs. Evaluation needs to be also fine-grained, and we'll get to that in a couple of slides on what that means. And of course, evaluation needs to be actionable because it's the whole point of making progress. Let's get to it. What do we mean by evaluation needs to be specialized? If I ask you, how do you evaluate your LLMs today? You might come up with a certain list of criteria. My responses need to be accurate. They need to be complete. They should not be toxic. They should be fair and not have any biases. It's easy to come up with some of these criteria, but pretty hard to nail down the exact set of criteria. And even if you have nailed down this exact set of criteria, it's pretty hard to actually manifest it in the product and make it happen such that you can put an LLM into production today. But that's not enough. Even if you do this hard part, it's not enough because for enterprises, your LLMs need to have specialized evaluation. Does this adhere to my branding guidelines? Does this follow company policies? Is it compliant? The questions keep getting harder. And unless you have answers to these questions, you will not be allowed to put these LLM systems into production. So the first key message here is that enterprises need evaluations that are very specific and fine-tuned to the LLMs and the use case that they have at hand. And here's how we do that in the product today. When you have LLM responses, of course, you can ask a subject matter expert or SME to annotate these responses on various set of criteria. But they're not going to be there to evaluate all these responses. You're going to get about 5, 10, 15% of good SME feedback. And the name of the game is, how do you take this 15% feedback and scale it to the 85% of data points that don't have SME feedback? And the way we allow you to do that in the product today is with 3 specific evaluators. The first is a simple heuristics-based evaluator. You can think of this as simple Python functions. As an example, your responses should not include names of competing products, your competitors' products. That's a pretty easy thing to check with a simple function. So that's an example of a heuristic. The second class of evaluators are predictive models, where you can now have models predict if the response is accurate or not. As an example, you could have a PII model or a toxicity model detect if the response contains any confidential data or any toxic responses. So you can fine-tune these predictive models or use them off the shelf as an evaluator in Snorkel Flow today. And the third is a class of LLM-based evaluators, where you can now prompt LLMs. You can teach them how to judge responses by giving them a set of criteria and explaining them what good and bad looks like. So that's the third class of evaluators. Let's get to the second message. Evaluations need to be fine-grained. Let's say I told you that you had a chatbot in production that's 74% accurate and 82% robust. Does that tell you something? Maybe not. I'm pretty sure that you're quickly thinking about, hey, what are the 26% of data points where the responses are not accurate? Is it inaccurate and not robust at the same time, at different times? That's where your mind starts wandering. And when you look at those data points and you see them one by one, you'll realize that there are many different forms of failure. There are many different ways to generate a bad response. And now if you start, and this is because generative models have vast output spaces. And if you start fixing these one by one, you're now playing a game of whack-a-mole. You're not really sure if I'm making progress in the right direction. So an evaluation is not just about surfacing, here's all the bad responses. It's a good evaluation system should also surface all the patterns in these bad responses. As an example, what if I told you that the 26% of bad responses were related to customers in Oregon on products ABC? Now that tells you something. That tells you that you either need to go fix a RAG system, or maybe there is some information that the LLM was not trained on. And that gives you a direction to move ahead. And that is an interesting subset of your data that we call slice. So if you slice your data according to the business needs, here's all my questions and responses for product A, for product B, for product C, you can now get metrics that are per slice. So how accurate, robust, compliant is it per slice? And that gives you actionable information to take the next step. So how is it done in the product today? So in the product, we let you write what are called slicing functions. These could be either programmatic or manual, where manual slices are you literally associate a data point to a slice. A programmatic slice could be either a simple Python function or could be model-based. And now you can start grouping your data into interesting subsets. And you can then get metrics per subset for these slices. As an example, here you can see that the response accuracy for topics related to disputes are pretty low. So maybe that's a bucket you need to go double click on. So that's what we mean by evaluations need to be fine-grained. Let's look at the third takeaway. Evaluations need to be actionable. Evaluations are not just about performance assessment. They should be about performance improvement. Like, am I moving in the right direction? And when you double click on your errors, there could be many different errors. There could be retrieval errors. Maybe the chunks were insufficient or irrelevant. There could be generation errors. And we just saw that these models have vast output spaces. So there could be many different failures across the criteria that you've set forth. Or there could be errors in your evaluator. Like, who's going to judge the judge? Right? The judge can make mistakes too. So this is something like you're building the car as you're driving it. You're building your evaluation system as you're using it to test LLMs. And that's what makes this process really hard. So what Snorkel does is we give you a guided workflow so that you can take these errors and pinpoint them to, here's maybe a fix that I could try. Perhaps for this slice of data, I need more ground truth. I don't have enough SME input on this. On this slice of data, the SME and the evaluator have huge disagreements. And I'm going to trust the SME, which means I need to go fix my evaluator. And as you start double-clicking on each of these error buckets, you'll come up with either simple fixes, or you'll realize that, okay, maybe for this use case, what I really need is brain surgery. I do need to fine-tune my LLM. Right? You're not going to fine-tune your LLM on day one, but this sort of an analysis will surface the right conditions and help you make decisions on whether I need to fine-tune my LLMs or embedding models. So in a nutshell, evaluation is an iteratable workflow in Snorkel today. So enough with the slides. We'll tell you how this is done in the product. Over to you, Rebekah.
Awesome. Thank you, Venkatesh. I'm Rebekah, and I am really excited to be here with you today. Venkatesh has covered a little bit of the what and the why, and I'm going to explain how and then show you in our product today with our most recent software release how you can do this. So this is the workflow. There are 4 steps of the workflow, and don't worry if this doesn't make sense right now. We're going to walk through it step by step. So step 1 is onboarding. For onboarding, you have some artifacts that you need to define. So these 4 artifacts are things that will help you in your evaluation workflow. Criteria, these are the axes you care about, right? So maybe completeness, robustness, maybe some use case specific ones like don't contain PII in your responses. Then we have evaluators. So these are the functions that will take in a data point and then return whether or not that data point satisfies the criteria. So you're likely to have an evaluator for every single criteria that you define. Reference prompts. This refers to the set of prompts that are fed into the LLM. And this set of reference prompts is not going to change a whole lot. It might change a little bit, but they're generally stable. And what will be changing are the LLM responses, right? As your model, your fine-tuned model gets better, hopefully each round of improvement, the responses will change and be better. And then finally, data slices. This is a concept I'm really excited about. Essentially, your business objectives, the subsets of data that you care most about, you can turn into a slice and see metrics for every single slice you care about. So very fun. And we actually have smart defaults available for all of these, so you can get started really quick, and then you can customize according to your use case as we keep going. So step 1, you define these. Step 2, you run the benchmark. We want to get you evaluating really, really fast. And this is a sneak peek of what you'll see in our product later today. But you can see we have a plot with the model iterations on the x-axis, and you can view it for different metrics that you're evaluating across. You can see kind of this table of all of your evaluation data with slices as the rows and evaluators across the top. So we'll see this in live really soon. But that's what happens when you evaluate, is you get all of this data about how you're performing. Once you've run that benchmark, you have a couple decisions to make. The first thing that you're likely to do is want to refine that benchmark, right? This is a new benchmark. You're not quite sure yet how much you trust it. And so you want to revisit those artifacts and make them even better. So maybe your boss looks at all of the criteria that you defined and says, hey, can we tweak this one? I don't quite understand what you're trying to say by explainability. One thing that I want to highlight here is actually this mini iteration loop between ground truth labels and evaluators, right? So last time I touched on our artifacts, we didn't have ground truth labels. That's so you can get started really, really fast without waiting on your SMEs. But as we all know, SMEs are really important, and they contain knowledge that we need to capture. And so at this point, you have a better sense of where you might want those SMEs to focus, right? So you have evaluators, and maybe you're not sure if you trust an evaluator. And so you can have an SME go and label data for that criteria that that evaluator is evaluating on, right? So it's a very focused, specific task that you can give to the SME. And then once you've gathered those ground truth labels, you can use them as a comparison against your evaluator to see if your evaluator is performing how you want, and if you should be trusting your evaluator. And if there's some discrepancy, now you know, okay, let me look back at my evaluator and refine that evaluator a little bit. So you get this mini iteration loop here to scale up your evaluators so that they can incorporate all of the domain expertise that's in your organization. And once you've gotten them to a good point, then you can scale up without having to return to SME annotation, and we'll see that. So you're likely to do this benchmark development iteration loop a couple times, right? Maybe you tweak the criteria, then you tweak the prompts, tweak the evaluators, and you'll eventually get to a point where you trust your benchmark. You're really excited about it. You know, you've kind of got all of the different artifacts nailed down, and now you want to switch gears and focus on your LLM system. So when we say LLM system, this can include a lot of different things, right? It might include your retrieval system. It might include the prompts that you're using, the system prompts or the user prompts, and it might also include the LLM itself that you're using. And so we have in Snorkel Flow ways to work on and develop all of these, right? So you saw a really exciting demo about prompt development earlier today, and then we have RAG and LLM fine-tuning in the product today, which is really fun. I'll be showing you LLM fine-tuning later. So you can use any of these things, tweak any of these system components in this system development step. And of course, we love iterative loops here at Snorkel Flow. And so once you're done with that, you'll come back and you'll run evaluate again to give you a sense of how you're doing. Did you improve? Is this iteration better than the last iteration? After a couple iterations, you'll be ready to deploy, right? That's our goal, to get everyone to production. So I will now pop out and demo to you live on our current product how you can do this. So to set the stage, we are going to be working at a healthcare insurance company today. It's going to be called Be Healthy. And throughout this demo, I'll be taking a couple different roles. Sometimes I'll be a data scientist. Sometimes I'll be a subject matter expert. And there will even be a brief period where I will be the CEO. So stay tuned for that. We are going to start with step 1, right? So if we look here, we're going to start with onboarding. So I will now take you over into our product. And here we are. This is our datasets homepage. We're looking at a dataset that I've created for us. And we are going to be writing some criteria. These are typically statements in English, and they have both a name and a description. So you can see here that I've written several to get us started. And I want to point out a couple things. These bottom 5 are pretty generic, right? These would probably apply to any use case. We always want our answers to be complete, correct, polite. So you can use these out of the box from our GenAI cookbook and use them across all of your use cases. I'm now going to point your attention to these 2. These 2 are much more use case specific, right? We don't want any of our responses to contain PII. And we also don't want to be mentioning any of our competitors. So it's likely that you'll have some criteria that will be very specific to your use case that you'll want to be able to customize. If we want to create a new criteria, it's very easy. You just come over here, you enter your name, your description, and it will populate here. You also might want to edit one, right? So maybe my boss looks at this and says, come on, Rebekah, really? That's the best description you could do? And so I can say, okay, I'll try again. I'll come in here and I can, type whatever else I might want. I copied in a better one, right? So this is much more thorough and complete of a description for our completeness criteria. So now I will save it, and we have that thorough description. Once you've defined these criteria, you can actually go in and look at, this is our annotation studio. So this is what the subject matter experts would be looking at. And you can see you have all of these label schemas here on the right-hand side. They have both the name and the description. You can see now this is a much better description. Good thing I edited that. And I can even filter it down, right? So maybe I'm like only caring about tone today, and so I just want to only look at that and check it out. So we've defined our criteria, right? That was one of our artifacts. Another artifact we need to define is our reference prompts. And so if we go back to here, we can look at our data sources. And there's a lot of different ways that you can gather data, right? So these could be historical data that you have from questions that have been asked to chatbots that you already have. They could be questions that are asked to your real life human customer service agents. They could be synthetically generated. They could be written by subject matter experts. However you gather the data, you can upload it to Snorkel Flow, right? We support lots of different ways to upload the data here. And I've uploaded data for us, and so we can actually just take a little peek right here and see, look at some of those reference prompts for this use case. Right, so you can see here on the left some questions. Can my insurance be terminated? How does the plan coverage change? Does it assist with long-term disabilities, right? So these are the reference prompts, the questions that we're expecting our insurance chatbot to get. And then these are the responses for our current version. And hopefully we'll see these improve. So those are the reference prompts. That's artifact 2 for onboarding. Now that we have our data in the product, we want to slice it. And so I'll actually take us back into this data view. Everywhere you can see your data, you can also view your slices. So there is this little slice of pie icon, and you can click on it, and you can see the slices pop up right here. And I'm going to actually explain a little bit about this. So we have manual slices and programmatic slices. And so the manual ones are like these ones, nothing too special. The programmatic ones have this special slicing function icon. So you will write a function, and then that function will get applied over the entire data set. So you don't have to go through and manually click every single data point that you want to be in the slice. And this is great, right? This scales up your expertise, and we don't have to be manual. However, sometimes you're the human, and you're looking at it, and you're like, you know what? My function wasn't exactly right. I actually disagree. I want to manually override it, right? So maybe I look at this question, I'm like, our function thinks that this doesn't have to do with disputes, but I know better. I'm going to override it. You click it here, and you can see, okay, now we have a manual override of that slice. And it's visible here. I can maybe add a couple other slices. Maybe I'm like, actually, I want it to be Spanish. Obviously, this isn't Spanish, but you'll see that's a little bit of how that works. You can also, if you're wanting to zoom in to a specific slice and gut check, is my slicing function doing the right thing? You can come here and you can filter on a specific slice and say, okay, it thinks that this question is about out of network, and awesome, it's doing great. I trust my slicing function a little bit more. So those are some of the tools you could do around slices. Awesome, so we have now talked about onboarding criteria, reference prompts, and slices. The fourth one is really, really exciting, right? This is evaluators. And this is probably the trickiest one. These are the functions that take in a data point and return if it matches a criteria. And some of these evaluators could be pretty generic. Maybe you want to use an accuracy thing that you've used for every use case ever, and you can bring in generic ones out of the box. Very easy. We have some as well in our cookbook that's in our public-facing doc site that was launched last week. I hope you all check it out. But everything I'm doing here is available in that cookbook. So you'll have your generic ones. You'll also probably want flexibility to define custom ones. And at Snorkel, we understand that customizing is really important to each of you. So anything you can think of as an evaluator, you can do. And the way that we enable this is through our integrated Jupyter notebook. And this is our SDK. It's part of our product. And so we will actually jump right over here. Here's our notebook. And you can see I've laid out our workflow right here. And we're going to be focusing on step one, defining our evaluators. And there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different types of evaluators that you might want to do. I'm going to just walk through two today for the sake of time. The first one is this heuristic-based one. And Venkatesh mentioned this earlier, but essentially, it's a pretty straightforward function, right? These are all of our competitors, and we don't want you to mention them. We don't want our customers to know that any other healthcare companies exist, right? If we don't mention them, they don't exist. So you can write a heuristic function and say, don't mention these, and then register this evaluator to your application. So that was pretty straightforward. That's a heuristic. Now let's think about our criteria completeness. So this criteria is a little bit more tricky. If I was to write a heuristic for completeness, I might think about length, right? So maybe like if the response is more than 300 characters, then it's more likely to be complete. But as you all know, that's not going to do the trick, right? Your LLM could just spit out lots and lots of gibberish, and we don't want that. So in cases where you need a more nuanced evaluator, you can do an LLM as a judge. And essentially what you do here is we integrate with a lot of external model providers. You can register any model you want, and you can test the prompt, right? So you can write a prompt and test it over, a subset of your data so you don't waste all your credits and get the finance team mad at you. And then once you're satisfied with how your prompt is performing over this subset of your data, you can do a similar thing where you turn it into a function, right? So this is now our evaluator that is our LLM as a judge over completeness. It has that prompt and goes over our data set, and then we register it as an evaluator. So that's a couple different ways that you can define evaluators. Obviously, the world is your oyster here. You can think of a criteria, you can think of a function, and register it. We make it very flexible for you. Okay, so we've now finished the onboarding step, right? We have criteria, reference prompts, slices, and evaluators. And so what we'll do is we'll hop here to step 2, and we want to just create a simple evaluation report, very straightforward. You just run one command, and now it'll take you over to our evaluate page. And so here in our evaluate page, we are looking at all of our reports. And I've pre-made them just for speed here. And the one that we just created at this point in our workflow is this baseline report. So let's go in and look at the report. Awesome. So this might be a lot to digest, right? Let's walk through it a little bit. As we said, the slices are the rows here. And then the evaluators for each criteria are the columns. And so you can see that we have some just ground truth evaluators here, and then we also have coverage. So I'll start on the left and go cell by cell. 100% coverage on all our data. Great, all our data exists. We're glad we got that one right. About 77% of our data does not have a slice assigned. So this means that maybe we would want to go back, think about what are the subsets of data we care about, create some more slices, so that we're making sure that we're representing our entire data set in our slices. Okay, 5–6% of our questions are too verbose. Okay, this is interesting. We have 0% coverage for our Spanish slice. And this means that there's no Spanish data in our reference prompts, which makes sense, right? We're a company based in an English-speaking country, so we just haven't had any Spanish data yet. But actually, this slice was made because our product team is looking to expand to Latin America soon. And they don't want to hire customer support staff out there. And so they're hoping that this insurance support bot will be able to respond well to the majority of questions. So product really cares about our performance on Spanish. They asked us to make this slice and track the performance across our project. And now we know we don't have any Spanish data. So we're going to move to step 3 of our workflow, benchmark development. We need to refine some of our artifacts. Specifically, we need to look at this slice and our reference prompts and gather some Spanish data. So if you were to gather Spanish data, there's a couple of different things you might try, right? You might call up some SMEs, see if anyone knows Spanish. You might translate some. You might try to synthetically augment a data set. I called all of our SMEs. They're all busy. None of them wanted to do extra work for me. And so I just translated a couple questions just to get us started. So if we look back over here and we come back to our data sources, you'll see that I've uploaded another data source. And it's really just a couple rows to get us a sense of how we're doing and get us started. Right? So we have here 9 questions in Spanish and how our chatbot is currently responding. And now if we rerun evaluation and go back to our evaluate, we can see, did it work? Did our Spanish data get picked up, right? So this is our new evaluation report, and it claims to have Spanish data, so let's see. Okay, awesome, 0.3%. That's about right? 9 rows is very small. You could scale that up however you want, but great to see that we're making progress here. And now we have changed our reference prompts and added a little bit more slice coverage. So now if I keep looking at this benchmark, I'm looking for anything else that I might want to refine, right? So like I have these evaluators that I defined, and I have, okay, here we go. So I have this criteria completeness, right? I'm trying to see, is my response complete? And I can do like a side-by-side comparison between our ground truth of completeness and our LLM as a judge. And you'll see that there is no data for the ground truth. And this makes sense. Our subject matter experts have not annotated any data. So we actually have no idea if this LLM as a judge is accurate or is just making things up as it goes. So what we probably want to do at this step is gather some of those ground truth labels, right? And so maybe I'll come back here and I'll say, okay, we have this ability to create very focused batches for our subject matter experts. So I can come in here, I can create a new batch, I'll say completeness, and they could annotate on any criteria, but we only care right now about figuring out if that evaluator is doing well. So we're just going to focus on completeness. I'll fill out a couple other things, nothing too exciting. Let's assign it to me, and we'll create this batch. Right? You see immediately it shows up there, and I can go in and I can annotate. And you'll see here that now on this side with all of the criteria, it's very focused, right? The subject matter experts are not going to get distracted. You don't have to train them up. They just have exactly what they need to do in front of them with the data points and the criteria that you care about right now. And this one I've accepted because it's a complete response. It looks great. I can, look at the other one. And this, I guess I should explain here. So we have the instruction with the instruction prefix. We have the LM response. And then we also show you the context that was extracted to generate that response, right? So the SME has everything they need to understand this response. And I'll say, okay, we like that one, we don't like that one, we like that one, and hopefully your SMEs are a little bit more careful than I am. This is why I'm an engineer and not an SME. But you go through, you label a bunch, and then Generally, we have a reviewer workflow, so somebody would come make sure that I didn't just make things up like I just did. But the reviewer's out today, so we're just not going to tell them, and we're going to commit. Your SMEs can't do this. This is just because I have admin privileges on the instance. Don't worry. So then you commit your ground truth, right? Awesome. So now I have some ground truth in there, and I can go back to step 2, rerun, evaluate, and see how we're doing. So I'll come back here, and let's look at our next report, right? This is our report after we've added that completeness ground truth. Okay, so we can once again select which metrics or which evaluators we care about, do this side-by-side comparison. Okay, this is interesting, right? The subject matter experts are saying that a lot higher percentage of the response are complete than our LLM as a judge evaluator is, right? So we're seeing a pretty big discrepancy here. This might be because I made up all of the labels, but if you saw this in your case, you would want to then go back, look at your evaluator and say, what do we need to tweak, right? Are we missing something from the prompt? Maybe you have a subject matter expert. Look at the prompt and say, like, what are you noticing that this is not encapsulated in this prompt? We also have a free text label schema that was showed in one of the earlier ones where the subject matter expert can write exactly what they're noticing, and you can use that to then incorporate into the prompt. So this is kind of that mini iteration loop, right, where your ground truth labels will help you know whether or not you can trust your evaluators. So after a couple more iterations, you're hopefully going to be trusting your evaluators, trusting the whole benchmark. And now we're going to shift to step 4, right, where we want to now think about our LLM system. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to refine your LLM system. We're going to do LLM fine-tuning today, and Marty, one of our PMs, is giving a talk on this later today. So I'll keep it more high level so I don't steal his thunder, but we'll touch on it briefly here. Essentially, we are back here in our notebook, and we're in step 4, system development. And we've talked about, the different system components and what you can do to improve them. We have an integration with AWS SageMaker, and so what you can do is you can set up the connection. Obviously, I'm currently in the data scientist role, right? You would not make an SME do this, but all of this code is available in our cookbook, so you don't have to know how to do it on your own. You basically set up the connection, you curate what data you want to fine-tune on. So you might have, we talked about this completeness, right? LLM as a judge. So you might take that evaluator with a couple other evaluators and use it to train a distilled model. And then you can take that distilled model and you can say, okay, anything that model is accepting with over 90% confidence, those are the data points that we want to use in fine-tuning, right? These are what this group of our evaluators are saying are good data. So you feed those good data points into the fine-tuning job right here, and then you pull the data back in and rerun evaluation, right? So at this point, you'll have 2 model iterations. You'll have your first iteration, we're calling it experiment alpha, and then you'll have your second fine-tuned iteration, experiment beta. And now we'll go back and see how this is working in the evaluate. Right, so we're here at this report, and if you're paying attention, you'll notice it's the last report. So we're getting really close to the exciting part here. This is our fine-tuned iteration, and when you click View Report for this one, I'm actually going to have us compare models, right? So you see this toggle in the corner, and I can compare the first iteration with the second iteration. Okay, wow, we're seeing some diffs, right? So you can see that across these iterations, we pulled the good, complete responses, and so now this fine-tuned model, it's 70% more complete, which is awesome, right? This is something that we love to see. You can see that mentioning competitors, this is another evaluator that we pulled into our quality model, and we're down. We don't mention competitors as much. This is also good, right? We wanted to drive down competitor mentions. And then finally, we're looking at this ground truth evaluator, and you'll notice how we have that data, right, that we labeled for the first iteration, and then this new iteration doesn't have any ground truth data. So if we were relying solely on subject matter experts to evaluate our model, you'd be back at square one. You'd have no labels, and you'd have to go get their time, get them to label everything. before you had any idea how your model is performing. But because we've created these automatic evaluators that we used our first iteration to learn how to trust, we can immediately see these numbers and know how we're performing, right? So this is how you scale up your SMEs and make it much faster and more programmatic. So this is the part that I'm really excited about. This is where I get to pretend to be a CEO, a lifelong dream. And CEO time is very valuable, right? And so I'm only going to be the CEO for about 20 seconds. And I'm going to show you what you as the data scientist would show your CEO, right? We're going to go to this evaluate homepage. Ready? Okay, this is it. This is the plot. This is all they have time for, model iteration, and they can see our performance went from 12% to 90%. As the CEO, I think you're doing a wonderful job. The entire data scientist team is now going to get a raise, and that's that. Now, I'm not the CEO. I'm currently closer to a data scientist role, so I care about everything else that's also on this page. So I'll just walk you through that. This plot is really, really useful to show to people who are interested in your project, right? People are constantly asking, how are your experiments going? What's the progress? You can show this to them. They immediately get a sense of, okay, we're trending upwards. That's great. That's what we wanted. You can also look at it across different metrics, right? So this is the competitors one, which we wanted to trend downward on. So doing great. So as the data scientist, this saves me time. I don't have to explain to everyone how the project's going. They just know. This table on the right shows you the recent iterations of your evaluation report. And so this is kind of like a technical overview of the steps that you've taken to get where you are today, right? You can see we started with our baseline, then we added Spanish data, we added ground truth, and then we fine-tuned our model. And this will show you your most recent 10 iterations. So you'll be able to get high-level overview very quickly. And then we also include the latest report here at the bottom. So you also get this report that we looked at recently. And so at this point, since we're here at 90% completeness, we are ready to deploy. And you can use this workflow to get all of your models into production. Thank you.